let's talk chaos. So, chaos in Warhammer is kind of the well known bad of the bad, so to speak. Now, for me and most people you talk to about this hobby or this game specifically, this universe is there is no good or bad guy in these worlds. It's just like you got bad and you got worse. Because it's just people trying to survive and doing what they need to do, but also pushing their own agendas. But it's kind of well known that chaos is the worst of the worst. They will do whatever they need to spread their chaos. And for me, I at the time, I think I'm being like 10 years old or so, really liked how they looked. The look of a chaos warrior all adorned in like heavy armor and plate mail with like helmets with like the Viking horns and stuff like that. That was really cool for me, especially because the only armies, as we talked about in the past video, that we actually had and used and painted were humans, dwarves, goblins, orcs, the really like basic generic things in most fantasy universes. When I think that the way that we were playing, my first thought goes straight back to Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, where it's just really simple but fun. It's a really cool universe. And so when I got into the Chaos Warriors, I bought the battalion box, which I actually have sitting right here in front of me. I still have them. I still love them. I really want to get back into painting them to make them look really nice. Um, but when I got into these, I was like ready to go, hit the ball rolling. So I started with the battalion box. Sadly, I never bought anything additional, but with all the new stuff coming out, or that actually has come out for now, Slaves to Darkness, which is the new name of this faction. I might jump back in there because also Archaon. Oh my god, I love Archaon as the big model. Thing is huge. So somebody at one of my local stores has it, and he brought it in one day, and I was just looking at it. I was just like, boy. But yeah, so all my entire Chaos battalion is primed in black, and I did a little bit of painting. So for example, this is the champion of my warriors with green armor, still using like that metal color on like the helmets and the knee pads and the chainmail, and then of course the cloak being red, just because I like those two colors together, made them stand out. Now, I personally just not a huge fan of painting things like an army solid black or using that as the primary color, just because to me it's like, yeah, I could just prime it and then boom, I'm good to go. I like having a lot of color on my stuff, which there's no harm in that. But I chose this green color because green's one of my favorite colors, and as you can see here, this is one of the original knights that I painted back in the day. That it's not the greatest, especially when you really look at his face. It's pretty bad. This army was my first real attempt at painting. Like if you looked at my dwarves, which I would have to like dig out, I have them. If you look at the way I painted the dwarves, I just slapped paint on there. I didn't thin anything down. It's really clunky and like chunky pieces of paint just kind of slathered on there. Um, but it was fun because that was my first go at it. But with these, I really took my time. And for example, even recently, I've kind of looked into maybe doing something more with these units. So this is my Marauder flag bearer. He is primed, and then I took gray primer and just kind of went over him to kind of give those highlights and shadows on there. So it looks nice. I know I can definitely do more with it. I believe I did. So here's another example for this is I also hate painting skin tones. Like it's super hard for me. But like this guy, this was like one of the OG ones I did. I just put the skin tone down and that was it. Most of them, about like 50% of them have like at least one color on it. Then I took the Zenithal method, which is that gray on top of the black, and I started to paint skin tone again on like this dude, and it looks better because like for example on this arm over here, you can actually see the that detail in his muscle versus just the standard paints on the black where it doesn't, it just looks too significantly dark. That gradient starts to help really define those like small details, especially in skin. But another thing is, so this is a knight. Yeah, this is the knight that I did more recently. When I say recently, it's more like 3 years ago when I first started getting back into it. As you can tell, it's not as chunky, and it's a little bit more contained to the parts that actually need to have the paint on it. But all in all, Chaos Warriors were my bread and butter back in the day. I have these like Chaos. I forget what they're called. I think they're called Chaos Warhounds. These little dudes. And I get painted them. I believe that's like a Mornfang brown. It's really light brown. And then I tried airbrushing. This is my first. I use these as my guinea pigs for airbrushing when I first got it. As you can see with the paint that's on the base there. But I also do need to get these all rebased. These all used to be on square bases, believe it or not, square and rectangle bases. But I swapped them all out for the oval bases that run in Age of Sigmar, and the Warhounds. I just need to get the smaller versions of them so I can put them on their proper bases. But yeah, my chaos were insane when it came to the stats versus like my brother's human empire. They steamrolled, especially these knights, and I think that's kind of why my brother ended up purchasing more and more additional like units, the pistoliers and the great swordsmen, just so that way he could have something that was heavy hitting as well coming in. But these core battalion boxes, like I think back in the day, yeah, they're battalion boxes, and then they became like the core sets, the start collecting boxes for 40k now. It's like combat patrols and boarding patrols. I think is a new one. I genuinely still think they're very good purchases for anybody new into the hobby because they give you a lot of good things to start off with. And for the most part, they sometimes this is where opinions kind of get weird or differ. Is some people really try and put the value to these boxes. For example, the boarding patrol boxes coming out right now, I think are usually about like $80 to $100 in savings by buying this box versus buying everything separately. But I'm also the mentality that like a lot of the units that come in some of these boxes, I wouldn't normally just buy on my own. Because to me, spending like $40-50 on a unit that I'm like, it's cool, it's whatever. I can't justify it. But when I'm buying a bigger box, like buying the two armies in one boxes, I'm like, you know what? It's more value for what I'm getting. And yeah, I might not necessarily care for the units, but I also like going into this hobby and because of the painting side of things, or like the just wanting to build that skill, is to have more variety in things I want to paint. I realize that if I paint something that I don't necessarily like care for in terms of what the model looks like, that'll start to build more skills and more knowledge on how to manipulate the paint and the light and all of that. And so I do have a lot of stuff that I really don't care about, and I still have a lot of fun painting it because it's a challenge, And I'm trying a lot of different methods. I've been watching a lot of videos trying to figure out like how I want to go about painting a lot of these different armies. Talking about the coloring book method, which is, you look at every little individual piece of the model and you paint it as if you're, painting in the lines. And then there's, utilizing different lights, light sources, or if it's coming from the sun, if maybe they have like a glowing orb or like a torch in their hand, the light emanating from that object onto the rest of the model is something that I've been trying to really emulate as well, especially with some of the things I've been working on. The Skaven army is something that I also do have for Age of Sigmar, and they have a lot of like, fire and all that stuff. So I've been really experimenting there. But all in all, in terms of my journey, yeah, Chaos Warriors were that second group. And that's kind of where I stayed from like 2008 all the way to about 2016 when Age of Sigmar actually came out. I really only used the chaos. I was like on and off from the hobby between those two time periods. And what ended up happening was my brother had bought the like starter edition for Age of Sigmar when he was in England, and he shipped them back home. They actually gave us two boxes of the same thing by accident, and we just didn't know what to do with it, so we ended up keeping it. But it was Stormcast and the Khorne units. And so he kept Stormcast. I kept the Khorne because I was like, oh, they're similar to the Chaos. And to be honest, I actually I don't really care for the Khorne units too much. I have those still, and they are painted in a completely different color than this. I did green here for Chaos Warriors, and I did purple for them, which is really funny. But to me, I didn't really care for the Khorne units, and I actually would have rather stayed with my Chaos Warriors, which I actually ended up doing. So by 2016, I was already in college. I believe like a year or two later, let's say 2018, early 2018 was when I was like, you know what, I want to start painting again. I want to get back into the hobby. I want to start doing things. So I actually brought these units with me, and I'll show you real quick. Like they're in this little box here, all of them. I didn't have this box at the time. It was always a shoebox, but I brought them with me. Tried painting a little bit. I think that's when these cloaks actually got done. I knew I wanted to make them green, and I had put green on the knights, but I hadn't done any of the cloaks or the smaller details yet. So I did those in 2018, and that's why they look a lot better than the rest of the models. But I don't know. It just felt weird doing that where I was because I didn't know anybody, and it just wasn't something that I was really focusing on because I'm in college. I have other things I'm doing. I was working at the time, so it just wasn't really the hobby that I remembered. And it wasn't until 2019 after I graduated and when I really started to dive back into the whole hobby in its entirety. And that's when I kicked off with Age of Sigmar, even more so. That's when I say I actually truly started playing Age of Sigmar or joining the hobby for Age of Sigmar was in 2019, as opposed to 2016 when we actually physically got the first products. And that kind of leads us into the next army, which is actually the Sylvaneth, the Dryads. And let me tell you, I love Wood Elves, and I'm so sad that they don't exist in Sigmar. Pour one out for the homies, you know what I mean? But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, watching. I love talking about my armies and about my story. I know I can go a lot more in depth about them or a lot more in depth about the units I specifically have, but I don't really want to flood a video with all that information when it's not really my strong suit, Like I mainly paint them and I'm starting to play. So I'm hoping in the future I can actually talk more about why these units are good or why they're fun and what makes them, really unique and all of that. But thanks once again for tuning in, checking out, hanging out. Leave some comments about if you've had any of these armies or what your first armies were, just like what your journey's been. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with what we're doing here. Follow all of our socials, which is in the description as well as on our homepage. I primarily use TikTok and Instagram as my forms of content right now. I do have a Twitter, which I would use more frequently. I just really don't get on it too much. And then we do stream every so often on Twitch, all by the same name, by the way, Zavala Hobbies. And yeah, we just have a really good time. So once again, thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you guys next time.